Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining this evening's 15th Street Area Lit Lane Project Public Open House. We are going to get rolling here in just a couple of minutes. I'm going to give it a minute or so to let a few more people join, and then we'll get rolling. All right, so it looks like folks are still trickling in a little bit, but we are going to try to keep this to a tight hour. So in the interest of time, I'm going to get started. Thank you all so much for joining Midtown Alliance and the City of Atlanta this evening to learn about the 15th Street Area Lit Lane project. Midtown Alliance works as an implementation partner with the City of Atlanta to make the district a livable, lovable community for those who live, work, and play here. To that end, we're constantly working to improve our streets to make them safer and more accommodating to the needs of all. 15th Street Lit Lane is one such project that will provide a critical connection on the northern part of the district, and we're really excited to share the concept as it stands today. While we're committed to building this project, it's important to note that it's currently only funded through the design phase. We hope to complete those plans in 2021 and then begin identifying funding sources for implementation. Today, Megan, if you want, yeah, perfect. Today we will spend some time going over what lit lanes are and why they're important within the Midtown District, the existing conditions surrounding the 15th Street area, and a concept design review. Once we wrap that up, we'll move into about 30 minutes of questions from you all. We do have a large group today, and we're kind of expecting folks to trickle in and out. So to make things as efficient as possible, please just enter any questions you have at any point when they pop into your mind into the chat, which is located in the control panel. You can drop down. Just make a note that whatever you put in there is going to be available to everyone in the audience. So we'll try to get to as many questions as y'all put in there in our 30-minute question and answer session, but any responses we don't get to, we will provide written responses to. Those responses will be posted on the 15th Street Lit Lane project page. All right, so today we've got myself, Julie. I'm a project manager with Midtown Alliance. We are joined by Carrie from the City of Atlanta, Addie with Tool Design. We've got Megan, she's also with Tool. Tom, he's with Tool Design, and then Chris with Jacobs. So thanks again, and with that, I'm gonna hand it over to Addie to get us rolling on the presentation.
Great, thanks, Julie. Next slide, please. So the 15th Street project has its roots in the 2017 Midtown Transportation Plan. The guiding principles of that plan were to provide safe, vibrant, accessible, and multimodal transportation facilities. Over 1,000 folks participated in that study, with over 61 citing bike and pedestrian safety as the biggest issue. So 15th Street was one of the projects identified in that process to improve east-west connectivity in the district. Earlier this year, we were lucky enough for the City of Atlanta to adopt the Vision Zero legislation, which Carrie Byrne with the city will speak about momentarily. And that is really to improve road safety, and that includes lowering vehicle travel speeds in the city. So all that brings us to the 15th Street project. In short, this project aims to improve safety for all users, slow vehicle speeds, reduce vehicular congestion, and provide dedicated space for all modes. Next slide. So you might ask, what are lit lanes? Well, lit lanes are light individual transport lanes. They're really looking at a targeted area of trips, short last mile trips, but really focused on human powered and electric trips. So you're talking about bikes and scooters is really who uses lit lane facilities. Next slide. Lit lanes can take different forms. Some people just call them bike lanes, but they can be at street level. They can be fully protected. They can also be at sidewalk level. The image on the bottom right is sidewalk level. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Carrie Byrne. She is with the City of Atlanta's. She's the Chief Bicycling Officer.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Thank you, Julie and Addie. My name is Carrie Byrne. I'm the Chief Bicycle Officer, as Addie mentioned, with the Atlanta Department of Transportation. To give you some context on where the city is coming from as a newly formed Department of Transportation, safety is a critical focus of all of our transportation work. Data shows that traffic death rates in Atlanta are unacceptably high. Slide. In 2019, 73 people died trying to get where they were going. This is not something we should or need to accept as a city or as a department. Each of these is a tragic incident, and we need to strive to eliminate these. Next slide. With the recent creation of ATL DOT, our Atlanta Department of Transportation, and the development of One Atlantic Strategic Transportation Plan, ATL DOT is committed to improving safety and making walking and biking a safer and more pleasant option for more Atlantans, all prioritizing safety, equity, and mobility. In April, the City of Atlanta unanimously adopted a Vision Zero policy to eliminate traffic deaths and serious injuries. Along with that was legislation to lower speed limits on many of our city streets. Slide. With that policy, Atlanta has joined 43 cities nationally who have adopted Vision Zero policies, peer cities that have implemented Vision Zero action plans that have shown meaningful reductions in traffic deaths. ATL DOT recently was awarded funding for creation of a Vision Zero action plan, and we're excited to get started on that work. Slide. The 2019 Midtown Alliance Community Survey shows that the Midtown community members already support a lot of these goals around making and investing in a more walkable and bikeable community. Slide. To do that, we need to create a network. We have a series of bike lanes throughout Midtown and a growing investment, but in order to create a system that is bikeable and accessible to more users, we need to connect that network. And this project that we're going to talk about tonight provides a key connection in that network. Slide. And we're working on a lot of things. At ATL DOT and Midtown Alliance have several projects that focus on safety improvements and expanding the bike network throughout Midtown. And we're always excited to work with partners like Midtown Alliance who are able to support our transportation goals around safety, equity, and mobility while focusing on creating an expanded network that addresses safety for all users. And I think through the conversation tonight, we'll see how looking at a bike infrastructure project can really address safety for all users of our streets, whether people are walking, biking, or driving. And with that, I think I'm turning it back to Addie to talk about the specifics of the project.
Great, thanks, Carrie. So this project aims to provide that east-west connection between the Arts Center, MARTA Station, and the Piedmont Park entrance at 14th Street connecting to the Beltline. As part of our initial focus area, while the 15th Street corridor was identified in that 2017 plan, we wanted to look at the alternatives both north and south and see if there was any viability in those. So we looked at the 14th Street corridor, we looked at 15th, and then we looked at 15th with a 16th Street leg that comes down to Arts Center Way. And Megan McMullen will be speaking about that analysis in a moment. Next slide. As part of this effort, we're really looking at an agile infrastructure approach that really aims to reduce the amount of pre-construction. So we have our great Midtown Alliance has a great partnership with City of Atlanta, and so they're working closely with us on this effort. So there's close partnerships we have. We're also really focused on the entire corridor of providing these changes within curb to curb. So we really want to minimize acquisitions and curb and gutter. We're also looking at low-cost materials that can be easily upgraded as funding becomes available. Next slide. So we began this project right at the beginning of April, and then since that time we have been going out to the community and stakeholders and doing a deep dive into the existing conditions. Currently we're in the round 2 of community engagement. From this effort, we will move on to schematic design. Once schematic design is complete, we will hand our work over to Midtown Alliance. Well, they will begin looking at how do they actually secure funding. As of today, there is no funding allocated for this project, so there's a lot of steps that need to happen between the completion of this work and implementation. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we've done community outreach. We've spoken to a lot of key stakeholders in 2 rounds along the corridor. There are various key property owners that really have influence along the corridor. We had the community remarks online survey, and currently we're with the virtual open house. This is not the last time that you'll be able to weigh in on this project as it moves forward. There will be future phases of engagement. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan McMullen, my colleague.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm going to give us the quick highlights on the existing conditions report. And you'll notice on the control panel to the side where there's a little handout portion of that menu, the full details are in the PDF that's available there for anyone who's interested in doing more of a deep dive after this. So as you members of the Midtown community know, there is a lot going on in the northern part of Midtown. It's a very vibrant, active urban area. We have portions that really feel like you're in the heart of the city with a lot of offices, hotels, restaurants, people bustling everywhere. There's cultural centers like the Woodruff Art Center and SCAD. And then we have some quieter neighborhoods. We have the wonderful Piedmont Park and a lot of different dynamics that are happening here. So we're looking at a facility that will hopefully be the first of several to be serving this area well as an east-west connection. In the existing conditions report, we looked at all of those different elements of character between 14th, 15th, and 16th Street. As Addie mentioned, we considered as alternatives. That report includes a summary of all of the community engagement that we did in that initial round, and origins and destinations analysis, looking at where the highest levels of activity are happening, how this will impact transit operations and making sure that it works well with MARTA's bus and rail operations, a multimodal traffic analysis that considers things like, how will it affect the way that cars are moving? Is it going to be the most comfortable route for cyclists? All different aspects there. And then leads into some recommended design considerations. So that full document, while I think is super interesting, we think you're going to be even more interested in the conceptual design. So we're going to focus the bulk of our time today talking about that, but feel free to check out the website or again, click that link in your handouts tab in this meeting to get the full report. So we've simplified it down for you, some of the key findings. You'll see this chart is really just a way to simplify a lot of those key understandings and the different dynamics that we took into consideration. So things like access to destinations, how it affected bus staging conflicts, the level of stress in the environment, all those different factors that you see up at the top there. And the big takeaway for this slide with all its different smiley faces is that there's no one perfect green line. There's no corridor where everything works out beautifully. There are trade-offs for each one of them. And the hope is ultimately that each one of them at some point will have lit lane facilities. But what we're really focused on with this project is identifying the best one for that more agile approach that Addie was talking about, something that we can get built relatively quickly and that will begin serving as a core east-west connection for North Midtown. And so with that in mind, there were a few key factors that really determined which corridor made the most sense for this particular first project. And two of those were the right-of-way that's available. That's when we say right of way, we mean the publicly owned land between private parcels. So it's the road and usually part of the sidewalks as well. And so considering the physical amount of space there, and then also what traffic is doing, how much space is really available to offer to another mode of transportation, and trying to avoid having to acquire any additional land, which can add not only expense, but also time to project implementation. And then the state route limitations were a big factor as well, particularly when it comes to 14th Street, which I think a lot of us Midtowners would love to see a lit lane facility there. But because part of that is under state control, the Georgia Department of Transportation, or GDOT, would have to definitely be involved in that process, which is good and appropriate, but again, adds to the potential time for implementation. So with those things in mind, we identified 15th Street as the preferred corridor to move into conceptual design. So when we're looking at 15th Street itself, and you can sort of see on the map here, the heart on the left side, that's the Midtown MARTA station, and then it crosses over Peachtree Street, past Peachtree Circle, and then over to Piedmont Avenue on the right-hand side before landing at the other heart at Piedmont Park. There are, of course, like any other corridor, there are some challenges here when it comes to driveways and garages, when it comes to the slope between Art Center Way and Peachtree Street, and then, of course, the intersection of Peachtree Circle, which in our crash analysis, we found to be one of the highest concentrations of crashes in this area. So that was definitely a safety concern that we wanted to pay close attention to as part of this process. But there's also a lot of opportunity here. For example, from Peachtree Street to Piedmont Avenue, the lanes are much wider than usual, so there's an opportunity to add this facility without detracting from vehicle capacity or having to remove any on-street parking. So there are a lot of positives to this corridor, and we're excited to share with you some of our initial ideas for how we might reimagine this to serve all users really well. So with that, I'm going to invite my colleague Tom Natwick to join us, and he's going to walk us through a draft concept preview.
Hi. Before we get into the concepts, we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 facility types you'll be seeing. So we can get to the next slide. So this first one is protected lit lanes. So when we mean protected, oftentimes separated bike lanes is another term. And so that's going to have a horizontal, but also a vertical buffer to travel lanes between the lit lanes. And so as shown here, we've proposed something along the lines of a precast or cast in place curb that could be a quick build, also with some flexible delineators. So the next one is more so on the eastern end of the corridor. We have lit lanes, a buffer, so that we have it as a door zone buffer, as shown in this photo. And then the last one, in some constrained locations, we've had to include a shared travel lane. So we've often do those with a green background to add some visibility to the lane. So we can get into the concept design next. So the first segment we want to talk about is West Peachtree Street to Art Center Way. So existing is now 2 lanes in each direction. We're reallocating that space and proposing 1 lane for each direction, but also a right turn for northbound travel up to onto West Peachtree Street. So the next few icons show the movement for the lit lanes themselves, just to highlight those 2. And now we'll get into the intersections for this segment. So this first one illustrates how we're going to tie into that 15th Street extension lit lane project itself. And so we have a continuous facility type from east to west, but also separating the east-west bicycle or lit lane movement from that right turn onto West Peachtree Street, just to improve the safety of that. And then I think we can get onto the Art Center Way next. So here, the existing is a unsignalized crosswalk. So we have 3 crosswalks on each leg of that intersection. So what we're proposing is to introduce an RRFB on that west leg, but also add in a ADA accessible ramp to the south side of that, to make that RRFB and narrow that pedestrian crossing. So as you can see, we've got refuge on both legs of those crossings on the south side, just to narrow that crossing and reduce that distance for pedestrians, and also facilitate a northbound turn for eastbound bikes onto Art Center Way. And you can see with those icons the movement for each of those turns and the east-west. So the next segment is Art Center Way to Peachtree Street. And we've got for the westbound direction on the lit lanes, we have a MARTA bus stop, and we also on the south side have the loading bays to deal with. So the existing is 1 lane for eastbound and 2 lanes in the westbound direction. So at the lane reallocation we're proposing, it's 1 lane in each direction with still the provision of a left turn lane at Peachtree Street itself. And then we've consolidated the existing loading bays to make that a little cleaner, and then also improve the sight distance as you approach the intersection for eastbound lit lane users. And then, yeah, well, the icons to show those movements. And then also at the MARTA bus stop, we're proposing a constrained bus stop type where you have the lane itself ramp up to the bus to curb height. And so we've got that shown there. And the next intersection on that segment is one of our most constrained on the corridor, where we have pretty tight existing curb to curb width, but also some plaza. So we have some shared lane markings shown here, but we're proposing to ramp up to sidewalk level for both east-west directions as you approach the intersection. So just continuing to look to separate the lit lane users from the travel lanes as much as possible. So we'll be sort of retooling and looking to optimize this intersection for both the north-south movement and adding 2-stage turn boxes, but also just making that east-west movement as safe as possible for all users. And so we'll also be adding a leading pedestrian and lit lane interval to those east-west crossings for this location. All right, the next segment we want to talk about is Peachtree Street to Peachtree Circle. So we've got, in the existing, we have 1 eastbound lane and 1 westbound with a dedicated left turn lane at Peachtree Circle, or at Peachtree Street, sorry. And so we're keeping that lane configuration, but we're looking to add in the protected bike lanes all the way through, protected lit lanes all the way through to Peachtree Circle. So you can see the east-west movement there. And I think the next one will zoom in more on the Peachtree Circle intersection just to see that a little more clearly. So we've looked at the safety data and proposed a 3-way stop and reallocating of the space on the west leg of this intersection. And so this is sort of an interim design as we've shown, and so there's a lot of potential to just reallocate that space for reimagining and collaborating on coming up with something permanent in the future. But this configuration also allows parking to remain along the leg of Peachtree Circle, but also realigning the driveways and adding a protected intersection and a in-street sidewalk or pedestrian lane also for east-west movement. So we're really shortening that east-west movement for pedestrians and the distance they have to travel, but also facilitating bicycle and lit lane movement north and south as well. Okay. The next segment we want to talk about, if you remember back, we have the buffered bike lane section. So this is where that is at. So it's Peachtree Circle to Lafayette Street. So we have the buffer on the door zone with marking with, we're proposing a paint designation as well to make that a little more visible and just clearly delineate those space. And so the existing is 1 lane for each direction with the on-street parking, and we've maintained that same section, but just added in that buffer and clear delineation of the lit lanes. So you can see those 2 movements. And this last segment is where we tie into the Piedmont Avenue shared use path project at the very east end. So we've continued the buffered lit lanes all the way to that last little segment at Piedmont Avenue to the tie-in point where we've introduced a section of protected lit lane just to make that movement really safe to get into that Piedmont Avenue facility and for going westbound as well. And at Piedmont Avenue, we've maintained the same existing parking configuration, but just delineated that a little more to clearly designate movements and the stop locations for all users. And I believe that would be it with this one. And now it's over to Chris.
Thank you, Tom. So as we saw in the concept, the new lane configuration, so I'm just going to review how that impacts the current traffic in the area. So the current lane configuration, if you go back 1 slide. So as you see, we have, starting from the west and working our way east, we have 4 travel lanes as we depart West Peachtree Street, and then 15th Street slowly narrows into 3, and then 2 lanes as we cross over Peachtree Street and work our way towards Piedmont Avenue. The future lane configuration mostly maintains the number of lanes. As we approach West Peachtree Street, we are still maintaining 2 lanes on the 15th Street approach to West Peachtree Street, as we know that gets a little congested during the afternoon peak period. And then we also maintain the number of lanes going across Peachtree Street, which is another pinch point along the corridor. And as well, we maintain those 2 travel lanes through Ansley Park. Go to the, on this slide. So here we have sort of the most congested part of the 15th Street corridor was the Peachtree Street intersection. We understand today there's some afternoon queuing on the westbound approach, some delay. Sometimes it blocks the access points to Colony House, Hanover House, and Colony Square access points. And also highlighted by Megan earlier in the presentation, the Peachtree Street Circle intersection with 15th Street is a area that has a lot of crashes. So in the years 2016 through 2018, our query indicated there was 17 crashes at this location. There was 3 injuries, and 6 of those crashes were actually angle crashes, which are some serious crash types. Looking into the concept, how we sort of address and mitigate some of the concerns. Like I said, crossing Peachtree Street, we are maintaining the same number of lanes. So we're not going to introduce any more pinch points or bottlenecks at this location. In fact, we've actually identified a way to improve some of the traffic at this area, even though it wasn't a goal of this project, since it is a lit lane design project. But we did identify opportunity to add a left turn phase to improve the congestion through this area on that westbound approach. So that should expect to see some shorter queuing as those westbound left turning vehicles now have a protected movement across the intersection. We're also introducing a three-way stop at the intersection with Peachtree Circle, which has been described earlier. The reason I pointed out that there was 6 angle collisions, that's a collision type that's correctable by installing an all-way stop sign. So we should expect to see improved safety at this intersection, not just for cyclists and pedestrians, but also for vehicles. And then we could also ensure a protected pedestrian and bicycle crossing as well. And also by shifting this intersection away from the Peachtree Street intersection, we're sort of separating out these 2 intersection operations and provide more space in between them, which should improve safety in between the 2 intersections as well. Megan, were you going to discuss these slides?
No, sorry, Chris, I'm taking over from you. Thanks for that. Yeah, so we've kind of gone over a lot, high level, lot to digest here, but there's no one perfect route. We understand some polls towards 14th or 16th, but really after reviewing all of the options, some really clear benefits to going along 15th Street bubbled up. Not only will we be able to connect a couple of other projects that are in the works, Piedmont and the 15th Street extension, but we're also going to be able to create a safe designated space for cyclists and scooter riders along 15th Street. We're going to be able to improve pedestrian safety. Simplified intersection at Peachtree Circle will really reduce those conflicts we see and improve everyone's safety. The other thing that really is going to benefit right now with such wide lanes, we see kind of high speeds going through Ansley Park. And so in addition to kind of reducing the width of those lanes just a little bit and adding a 3-way stop, we'll be able to slow traffic just a little bit to make it more safe for the neighborhood. we're going to be able to reduce some congestion with a new westbound left turn at 15th Street. Will really improve the flow of that intersection. And then, you know, we listened to feedback we received from the community and really took it to heart. And so the design that we've kind of put forward does preserve the on-street parking within the Ansley neighborhood. So with that, we're going to move on to the question and answer. So we've got a couple of different ways that I'm kind of monitoring communication as it comes in. We've got a chat box. There's also a question box. So I think the majority of people are using the question box. That's great. And so I will just begin kind of going in first come, first serve with some of these. So I'm gonna kick this first one, I think, to either Tom or Chris, just to talk about the entrance and egress to Colony and Hanover House in terms of the garage. And how we're addressing kind of visibility and safety concerns getting in and out. Chris, can you hear me?
Hi, yeah.
There you are.
I don't know if that was just me or you broke up halfway through the question.
Yeah, I think I froze for a minute. Sorry about that, everybody. And Megan, I think we had some slides that kind of demonstrated more specifically this area. Yeah.
So one of the things that's shown here is the build out of the curb that's done. That's going to be done by North American Properties as part of the Colony Square project. That's separate from this. So we're showing that alignment here. We also show the egress and ingress operations of the 2 condo building driveways as well. So one of the things that we're doing is simplifying again the number of intersections and conflict points along this area by closing off the leg that's identified by the number 7 there. So that will be less things to pay attention for while trying to navigate this area. Also, by narrowing the road, traffic will be moving slower through this area. So while you're probably thinking PM afternoon traffic, just think about all other times of day when cars might be traveling a little faster. This should hopefully slow things down. In terms of line of sight, again, by extending the curb, we're sort of formalizing that area of the street that today drivers use to inch out to see. So that will actually be formalized and now an extension of the driveway. As also mentioned earlier, the introduction of the green arrow for the westbound left turn movement onto Peachtree Street is expected to decrease the queuing that today extends beyond the driveways during the afternoon rush hour. Also, the introduction of the always stop at Peachtree Circle should also help meter cars that are traveling towards the Peachtree Street intersection and create some more gaps to enter and exit those driveways.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. I do think it might be important to mention as well that while we are trying to do everything we can to make the entrance and egress from Colony and Hanover House and Colony Square as safe as possible, we are of course limited to improvements along the right of way. And so the scope of this project, you know, we can't really change the way that that traffic flows inside the building, because that is definitely beyond what we are in charge of. So another question was kind of what prevents people from riding down 15th Street as it stands today, especially in terms of kind of thinking through fund allocation of funds. We, you know, we're really approaching a lot of these safe facilities with this 880 concept. So we want to make sure that any kind of thing that we designate as a corridor can accommodate folks across a spectrum of comforts. And so while of course any street in Atlanta is accessible and available to people on bikes and scooters, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody feels safe. And so in creating these projects, we are working to create corridors and connections that accommodate everybody. So whether you're someone who's riding with a 2-year-old on the back of your bike or a first-time rider, we just, you know, want to make sure that you feel safe and separated from vehicular traffic, which is a major barrier to people using other modes of transportation besides cars. Addie or Megan, I'm going to kick this question over to you. Can you talk a little bit more about the kind of the added time that having to coordinate with GDOT might added time and expense that coordinating with GDOT can add to a project?
Sure. The added time that a coordination with GDOT can really vary. I'm sure Dan and Clady probably have more significant recent experience, but it can add years, several years to any project. Once they get involved, there's certain processes and funding sources that need to be followed to that extent. And 14th Street being a designated GDOT corridor, that was definitely constraints that will need to be identified and worked through with GDOT. So the short answer is years with the GDOT process.
Thanks. All right, quick jargon update. So a leading interval at the intersection, especially where we're talking about 15th Street and Peachtree, it means that the bikes and pedestrians will get to go ahead of cars. This is great because it kind of clears out the intersection when cars want to do these movements, and it also allows cars to be alerted so that they're not kind of in conflict with pedestrians and bikes as they navigate through intersections. Yeah, Megan or Addie, do you want to talk about kind of how the 15th Street, 15th and Peachtree intersection ramps up onto the sidewalk, just for a little added clarity, and maybe highlight a little bit more what's going on with that MARTA bus stop?
Actually, I think Tom, if he can weigh in, I think he'd be good, and I'll kind of speak until he gets on. But yeah, those are really the pinch points of the whole entire corridor is the Peachtree Street, and I apologize, I'll turn on my video real quick. It's really the pinch point of the entire corridor. So we really wanted to make sure it's safe. We know that any kind of gap in the system really prevents all users from wanting to use the facility. So knowing that that was a gap, knowing we wanted to keep vehicular movement, that we've heard strongly that keeping that as close to the way it is today is important. We wanted to make sure that bicycles and other users had a place to go that wasn't constrained. We did look at keeping the bikes in the vehicular lane, but we felt for safety purposes, it would be best to ramp them up to the sidewalk level, and then they would cross over Peachtree Street, and then coming back into the vehicular lane. Tom, do you want to kind of expand on that at all?
Yeah, I think ramping up the sidewalk level allows us the opportunity to maintain that all ages and abilities facility while not touching the existing curbs. So we can still keep the costs down. So it's sort of maximizing the space we have available, but also being considerate about how we separate sidewalk pedestrians and bicyclists on the sidewalk. So that's sort of we'll be working out the details of those, but that's a consideration as we go into schematic design as well. And oftentimes with constrained bus stops, you're ramping up to the bus stop level is your most constrained option, but it offers still an enhanced crossing for users and allows that in-street bus stop without having to do pull over and be in the lane itself. And so we're seeing a lot of cities go to these constrained style stops, so they're becoming more commonplace, and especially alongside separated bike lanes.
Including in Atlanta and Decatur.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a couple, the closest and best example is probably over in Decatur, right? Yeah. Excellent, thank you. Tom, while we've got you up here, if I can get you to stick around, can you talk to us about kind of why we went with more of a, why we went with a T'd intersection as opposed to a traffic circle at Peachtree Circle and 15th?
That is really the space we have available with the between existing curb lines. I think a traffic circle could work really well given a certain construction cost, but I think given a quicker build that provides safety for all users, I think the protected intersection offered sort of that solution for us. And with the traffic circle, you do have the difficulty of if you wanted to maintain the separation to the lit lanes, you end up taking a bit more real estate without introducing those users into the roadway itself. So with the protected intersection, we can maintain that separation for longer until we get into that buffered area east of this intersection.
Yeah, it's great. Okay. So we've got a question about the timeline of the intersection of Peachtree Circle, and definitely understand that kind of this intersection is a safety concern and a priority for the community. You know, as we mentioned kind of at the beginning of our presentation, we have not identified funding to actually implement this plan, so we are, you know, definitely moving towards that direction. So unfortunately right now I can't say hard and fast when that construction would begin, but you know, of course, if it's a priority, please let council members and everybody know that it's definitely something that you want. Sorry, everybody. Apologies, I lost my spot. So we've got another question about maintaining on-street parking when we're trying to kind of move away from a more, you know, parking focused model in Atlanta. And, you know, if we took away parking, then we could have a larger lit lane facility. And while that is true, and there is ample parking in the area, including Colony Square and, you know, surrounding Ansley Park, we do always want to weigh the needs and concerns of everybody who lives in the area and uses these facilities. And, you know, during our stakeholder engagement, we definitely heard that, you know, maintaining parking throughout Ansley Park is really important to the neighbors who live there currently. And so we definitely want to respect and balance everybody's needs. And so that's why we really tried to work towards putting the lit lane down 15th Street, but also really listening to what the community wanted there. There's a question about connecting 15th Street across 75-85. That would be amazing. While there are kind of some lofty projects in the work about stitching and creating parks over 75-85, right now extending a bridge across is not within the scope of, I think, anything we're doing. Okay, so as a frequent pedestrian who lives at Hanover House, yeah, concerns about 15th Street and crossing Peachtree with vehicles and those conflicts. And so I think, as we mentioned earlier, you know, having that pedestrian lead on the interval is going to really help out. And so hopefully that signal optimization will really help as you get a head start from the cars to walk across. Yeah, okay. Any plans to provide safer access from 15th Street across Piedmont for access to Piedmont Park and the Botanical Gardens? Is it Addie or Megan? Do we have any kind of zoom in of that area? Yeah, if either one of you want to speak to that.
Sure, go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, so that project luckily is something that has already been in the works before this one. So you'll be seeing that improvement fairly soon. So if anyone is interested, head to the Midtown Alliance website after this. And there is a project for the Piedmont Avenue Complete Street, which will go, I believe, from it's either north or Ponce de Leon in the south, all the way up to our project. And so where you see this orange bicycle right here, it's not drawn in, but it will be added between these stops. There will be a new crossing here that'll help to bring some attention to cyclists getting across on the shared use path there. So that, while is not part of this project, is something that's already being previously addressed, and they're getting ready to move into construction for that project fairly soon.
Yeah, excellent. And I think that's kind of another reason why 15th Street really bubbled up as our preferred corridor, because kind of there is that existing connection there on Piedmont that flows really nicely in here.
Yeah, worked really well.
Excellent. Chris, I'm not sure if we studied actual speeds along 15th Street through Ansley Park, but do we have any projections for speed reduction as a result of this project?
We did collect some speed data as part of this project. However, the sample size was very low, so it wasn't statistically significant because we collected this data back in April when everything was sort of closed down. However, there is no projections of speed. However, in the areas where we're narrowing the roadway, previous studies have suggested that when you do narrow the roadway, vehicle speeds do drop. And again, that's more during those off-peak times when there's less traffic and people don't really have anything impeding their speed, that the narrower roadway should reduce their travel speeds.
While I've got you on the screen, oh, you just went away. We have a question about whether we've analyzed if bikes and scooters and pedestrians will have enough time during that that signalized lead at 15th and Peachtree to kind of complete their motion across the intersection.
Yeah, that's something that we considered in the analysis. The cyclist would have a sign indicating to use the walk indication of the pedestrian interval. So during those 10 seconds, they would be able to cross the intersection. And then during the flashing don't walk, pedestrians can continue to cross the intersection like they normally would with the vehicles going. And then that new left turn phase would actually come on after pedestrians and cyclists have already crossed the street so that they're not conflicting with the turning vehicles coming out of Ansley Park.
Excellent, thanks. So we've got a question about why a lit lane would be necessary through Ansley Park. Again, just kind of, you know, especially given that it's a residential neighborhood. And I think we can see from kind of, if you look at the whole plan, 15th Street does contain a chunk of Ansley Park, but there's also Colony Square, Woodruff Art Center, a number of properties on the east side that, I mean, on the south side, sorry, that Cousins owns, and kind of where Norfolk Southern used to be. that, you know, they're redesigning and that's going to fill up, a new hotel, a MARTA center, and then of course, as we extend 15th Street in an upcoming project, a number of other commercial and business spaces that are going to open up. And so this is really going to become a vibrant corridor, and so we want to just make sure that we're creating accommodating connections for folks. And so that is why the lit lane is necessary through that little segment. Did the team consider 15th to Peachtree to 14th as an option? We really considered all options. Again, we linked our existing conditions report. It's over in your control panel. There's a shorter version as well on our website. But if you review the existing conditions report, it really goes into why 15th Street bubbled up as our preferred. Tom or Megan or Addie, we have so many delivery trucks pull up onto street curbs. What does this plan do to kind of prevent that?
Addie, go ahead.
We're going to turn it over to you. We have spoken with Cousins and particularly kept the loading and unloading that is happening along the south side of 15th Street. And we've also been in discussion with Woodruff Art Center to make sure that we're understanding how their operations are going. So the design has been reflected of the discussions we've had with both those key property owners who have a lot of loading and unloading that's happening, including the Hampton Inn.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's definitely a practice that we see throughout the district that we're really working to address in a number of places. So great question. Another jargon question, and I apologize, constrained style stops for referencing back to the MARTA stop at the top of 15th Street. Basically what that means is that you've got kind of a ramp. Tom, you might be able to better explain it than I can, but there's a ramp that will get folks from the MARTA bus stop onto the sidewalk so that the bus doesn't actually have to pull into the lane. Right, by law, MARTA is required to pull all the way over to the curb for ADA accommodation. And so kind of this constrained stop allows them to stay in the vehicular traffic lane and still provide safe entrance and egress from the bus. There's a lot of questions popping up about Piedmont. I don't want to take up the time because we're talking about 15th Street right now, but I do just want to let y'all know that there's quite a bit of information about the Piedmont Avenue plan on our website. So please head over to Midtown ATL and yeah, tons of great information, some great renderings, and we're really excited about that project. Chris, this question is for you. How many bikes and scooters do you anticipate will be traveling down 15th Street during, you know, a variety of hours, peak and off peak?
Yeah, so we actually looked at some of the bicycle facilities or lit lane facilities throughout Midtown. We looked at the 10th Street cycle track on 10th Street, just south of Piedmont Park, and we looked at the 5th Street bicycle lanes, which service Georgia Tech. And so some of the more successful projects during some peak hours, the number of bicycles was approximately 1 to 2 cyclists a minute. So we're not looking at a constant flow of bicycles along the facility. So if this project is as successful as those, there would be approximately about 1 bicycle every minute. or so during peak hours, and probably 1 every 2 minutes during like off-peak hours.
Megan, did we have some graphics that kind of showed that? I thought we did.
Wasn't in the presentation.
Okay, well, we can. That's okay.
We can include that in the final report.
Okay. So we've got some questions about kind of who we were coordinating with at Ansley Park. We were working with the president of the neighborhood association. And so for the folks who are asking about that, I am happy to pass your name along to him. And we, tried to be as inclusive as possible. And so yeah. Sorry, I'm just trying to address these as they come in. Some of them have been answered, and so I'm just scrolling through. We've got about 4 more minutes left, so I just want to make the most of the time that we have. Sure, yeah, this is a good one. This will probably go back to Chris as well. Did this plan take into consideration the high traffic volumes coming in and out of the condos in Colony Square, once things kind of get back to normal?
Yes, so the traffic volumes that we used for the analysis have been used over the past year to also work with the 15th Street extension that is currently underway with Midtown Alliance that we are also working on with them. So not only does it include traffic volumes that are expected from Colony Square, but it also includes any sort of changes in traffic patterns as a result of the 15th Street extension that will extend 15th Street all the way to William Street and I-75.
Thanks, Chris. Just a note to our folks from Ansley Park who are joining that have questions, feel free to direct any questions you have to, specific to Ansley Park to traffic@ansleypark.org, and they're happy to kind of discuss what the process was. And then a question for Tom, is there a solid line or double line down the middle of 15th Street in Ansley?
That'd be a double yellow line. Just the graphic appears that it's a single, but it'll be a double yellow line like standard.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, I think that wraps up our questions as they came in. We, again, just want to reiterate that this is kind of an ongoing process that we're going through. So please feel free to shoot any questions that you have to transportation@midtownatl.com. Happy to answer anyone that we didn't get to, which I think we did manage to respond to every question that came in. We will also write up some responses and have those posted on the website, so you can go back and review those at any time. As always, we try to keep everybody as informed as possible, and so as we move through the next steps, future meetings and stuff, will definitely let everybody know. So as we're going to kind of wrap up this year with schematic design, and then kind of move forward and look towards implementation in 2021 and beyond. Oh, quick last question. It was ansleypark.org. So traffic@ansleypark.org or transportation@midtownatl.com. Or you can contact me directly at julie@midtownatl.com as well. So thank you everybody for your time this evening, your valuable input, and we look forward to completing this project in the future.